This is the story of Rome. From a village of shepherds to the greatest empire the world had ever known. From the cry of abandoned twins to the silence of a fallen capital. A journey through 2,000 years of human history. Before there were marble forums or legions marching across continents, there was only wilderness, rolling hills covered in oak and maple, the Tiber River, brown and sluggish, winding through marshland, wild boars rustling through undergrowth, the calls of birds echoing across empty valleys. This was Latium, the plain of central Italy where the Latin people made their homes. They were farmers and shepherds, living in simple huts, worshipping gods of hearth and field. They were unremarkable, one tribe among many in the Italian peninsula. The Greeks had established wealthy colonies to the south. The Etruscans, sophisticated and powerful, ruled to the north. And in between, scattered across the landscape, were the Latins. They could not have known that from their simple villages would rise a city that would name months, map the heavens, write laws that would echo through millennia, and build roads that still carry travelers today. They could not have imagined that their descendants would rule from Britain to Mesopotamia, from the Rhine to the Sahara. But history does not announce itself. It begins quietly, in forgotten places, with ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The story Romans told about their founding was not one of slow development or gradual growth. It was a story of violence and divine intervention, of fratricide and destiny. It was a story that would define Roman character for centuries to come. The belief that Rome was chosen by the gods, that greatness required sacrifice, and that even the most terrible acts might serve a higher purpose. Let us begin where the Romans believed their story began, not with historical certainty, but with myth and legend, with twin brothers and a she-wolf, with blood spilled on sacred ground. The story begins with a priestess named Rhea Silvia. She was a Vestal virgin in the city of Alba Longa, sworn to celibacy by her uncle King Amulius, who feared any challenge to his throne. But the god Mars came to her, cloaked in divine mystery, and left her with twin sons. Their names were Romulus and Remus. When Amulius discovered the birth, he ordered the infants drowned in the Tiber. Servants placed them in a basket and set them adrift on the swollen river. But the current carried them gently to the shallows near the Palatine Hill, where they came to rest beneath a sacred fig tree. There, a she-wolf found them. She was not a creature of horror, but a mother with no cubs of her own. She took the boys into her cave and nursed them, keeping them warm against her fur, protecting them from the dangers of the wilderness. A shepherd named Faustulus later discovered the twins and brought them to his home. He and his wife raised them among the flocks and fields, never telling them of their royal heritage. The boys grew strong and bold, unafraid of hardship, natural leaders among the other shepherd children. As young men, Romulus and Remus learned the truth of their birth. They helped their grandfather reclaim his throne in Alba Longa, but something pulled them back to the 7 hills beside the Tiber. That stretch of wilderness where they had been saved called to them. They decided to build a new city there. But even in the beginning, Rome was forged in conflict. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill. Remus preferred the Aventine. They consulted the gods through augury, watching for signs in the flight of birds. Remus saw 6 vultures, Romulus saw 12. But they could not agree on what this meant. Who saw birds first? Who saw more? The argument escalated. According to legend, Remus mocked his brother's walls, jumping over them to show how easily they could be breached. Romulus, enraged by this disrespect for the sacred boundary, killed his brother. Whether by his own hand or through his followers, the stories differ, but the result was the same. One brother lived, one brother ruled, one brother stood alone. Romulus drew a line in the earth with his plow, marking the sacred boundary of his city. "No one may cross these walls without death," he declared. The message was clear from the very beginning. Rome would be defended, even if that meant slaying kin. The traditional date was April 21st, 753 BCE. That year would be remembered not for the stones or the borders, but for the will behind them. Romulus named the city after himself and became its first king. The early city grew in rough circles around the Palatine Hill. Simple huts made of wood and thatch, wooden palisades for defense, small temples to unknown gods. Men from nearby tribes, drawn by the promise of a fresh start, came to settle in this new community. But there were few women. Romulus orchestrated what would become known as the rape of the Sabines. He invited the neighboring Sabine people to a great festival. During the celebration, at a prearranged signal, the Romans seized the Sabine daughters and forced them to marry. It was brutal, shocking, an act that should have led to Rome's destruction. But the Sabine women themselves, over time, came to bridge the two peoples. When their fathers and brothers came for revenge, the women stood between the two armies, holding infants born of these unions, and demanded peace. The Sabine men were eventually reconciled, and the two peoples merged. Rome expanded again. Romulus ruled for many years. Legend says his end was as mysterious as his beginning. One day, while reviewing his army on the Campus Martius, a violent storm arose. Thunder crashed. Lightning split the sky. When the storm cleared, Romulus had vanished. His followers believed he had been taken up by the gods, transformed into Quirinus, a deity of the Roman people. Whether this was true or not, his city remained. Rome had been born in violence, shaped by ambition, and claimed by divine favor. After Romulus came Numa Pompilius, a Sabine known for his wisdom and piety. Where Romulus had built walls and forged weapons, Numa turned his attention to temples and time. He shaped the early calendar, divided the year into months, created priestly offices, and taught the people to honor the gods with proper rituals. Numa established the cult of Vesta, goddess of the hearth, served by the Vestal Virgins. He built the temple of Janus, whose doors would be closed only during peacetime, and those doors would rarely close in Rome's long history. He gave Rome its religious foundation, the rituals and traditions that would bind the people together for centuries. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, rejected Numa's peace and gloried in conquest. He destroyed the rival city of Alba Longa and transferred its nobles to Rome, expanding the Senate. Under his rule, Rome became more than a village. It became a power that other cities feared. Ancus Marcius, the fourth king, built the first bridge across the Tiber and extended Roman influence westward toward the sea. He founded the port of Ostia at the river's mouth, opening trade routes that would eventually connect Rome to the Mediterranean world. The last three kings were of Etruscan origin, bringing with them new ideas in engineering, religion, and culture. Under Tarquinius Priscus, the Circus Maximus was begun for chariot races. Under Servius Tullius, Rome was divided into districts, census records were kept, and the military was reorganized. These reforms transformed Rome from a tribal society into something resembling a state. The last king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, took the throne by force, murdering his predecessor. He ruled with cruelty and suspicion, abolishing rights that earlier kings had protected and governing without the Senate's consent. His projects were ambitious, including the massive temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, but his methods were ruthless. His downfall came from within his own house. According to tradition, his son Sextus Tarquinius raped a noblewoman named Lucretia. Her public suicide in response to this violation ignited outrage among Rome's leading families. One of them, Lucius Junius Brutus, led a revolt. The people rose. The king was expelled. His family was cast out, and the monarchy itself was declared finished forever. In 509 BCE, the Romans established a new form of government. They rejected kingship and entrusted power to two consuls, elected annually, each able to veto the other's decisions. The Senate would advise, the people's assemblies would vote, power would rotate, never resting in one person's hands for too long. The Republic had begun. For centuries after, no Roman would dare claim the title of king without facing hatred and rebellion. They remembered the end too well. The age of kings had shaped them, but it had also taught them what power could do when held too tightly. The crown was broken. The sword passed to the people. Or so they believed. The Republic was an experiment. It was designed not to honor kings, but to replace them with men who held power only for a moment before giving it back. Where once there had been a single crown, there were now two consuls elected annually, each with equal authority, each shadowing the other with cautious suspicion. The Senate remained as an advisory body of Rome's elders, patricians, the old families whose ancestors had advised kings. The assemblies gave voice to citizens, though not all voices weighed equally. It was a system that looked orderly on parchment, but real power is never so neat. Rome's greatest enemy in these early decades was not some foreign army, but the bitter tension between patricians and plebeians. The patricians were the landowners, the ones whose families had always held power. The plebeians were everyone else, farmers, artisans, soldiers who bled for the city, but found themselves barred from holding office, forbidden from marrying into noble families, locked out of the laws that governed them. In 494 BCE, the plebeians did something extraordinary. They walked out. They left the city, climbed the sacred mount outside Rome's walls, and refused to return unless granted representation. It was a bold act when unity meant survival. Faced with a city without its workers and soldiers, the patricians gave in. The office of tribune of the plebs was created. These tribunes were sacrosanct, untouchable, empowered to protect the people and veto unjust measures from the Senate or consuls. The struggle continued for generations. The plebeians demanded that laws be written down, that justice be visible. In time, they won the 12 Tables, Rome's first code of laws, etched in bronze and displayed in the Forum, so that no citizen could claim ignorance or be bound by invisible rules. Beyond the walls of the city, other challenges pressed in. Rome was not the only city-state in Italy. It was one among many, surrounded by rival tribes and proud peoples who would not easily yield. Rome fought the Latins, battled the Sabines and the Volscians, and learned the brutal rhythms of constant war. In 390 BCE, disaster struck. A Gallic army from the north descended upon the city, and Roman defenses crumbled. The Senate was slaughtered. According to legend, the sacred geese of Juno squawked and shrieked as Gauls climbed the Capitoline hill under cover of darkness, alerting defenders just in time. Rome was sacked, its streets filled with fire and blood. The survivors paid a ransom in gold to buy the city's freedom. It was a wound that would never fully heal, a humiliation that hardened Roman resolve. From the ashes the Romans rebuilt. They fortified their walls, the massive Servian wall that would protect the city for centuries. They reformed their army. They reorganized their tactics. And they vowed that such shame would never be repeated. Rome began its methodical conquest of the Italian peninsula. It fought the Latin League and dismantled it, binding each city directly to Rome through individual treaties. Some cities received full Roman citizenship. Others were given partial rights. Still others remained formally independent, but bound to Rome through military obligations. This uneven system was not a mistake. It was brilliantly designed to keep cities loyal to Rome, but isolated from one another, unable to organize united resistance. To the east, the fierce Samnites controlled the rugged mountains of central Italy. The Samnite Wars stretched across generations. These mountain warriors were masters of ambush, catching Roman legions in narrow valleys. At the humiliating Battle of the Caudine Forks, Roman soldiers were forced to pass under a symbolic yoke in surrender. But Rome did not forget. It regrouped, adapted its tactics, and returned. The Samnite Wars taught Rome to be flexible, to learn from defeat, to turn every loss into a lesson. When Rome's growing influence threatened the Greek colonies of southern Italy, the city of Tarentum appealed for help from across the sea. King Pyrrhus of Epirus answered the call. He arrived with elephants, trained phalanxes, and the confidence of someone who had won wars before. He met the Romans in battle and won, and won again. But each victory came with devastating losses. After several costly engagements, Pyrrhus looked back on his triumphs and said that one more such victory would ruin him. His campaign collapsed. The Romans, battered but unbroken, remained. By the middle of the 3rd century BCE, there was no power in Italy capable of challenging Rome. The Samnites were subdued, the Etruscan cities absorbed, the Greek colonies, one by one, had surrendered or been taken. Rome had not imposed a single model across the peninsula. Instead, it wove a patchwork of colonies, treaties, and citizenship rights. This system was designed to keep cities loyal to Rome, but unable to unite against it. With Italy secured, Rome had more soldiers than ever before. It had roads connecting its colonies, legions trained through constant conflict, and a growing sense of destiny. But across the sea, another power had been watching. Carthage ruled the waters and the trade routes. Its ships patrolled the coasts of Sicily. Its merchants stretched from Spain to North Africa. Rome's expansion had brought it to the very edge of another world power. The wars of the peninsula were finished. The wars of empire were about to begin. The city of Carthage stood on the coast of North Africa, its harbors filled with merchant ships, its walls strong enough to withstand any land army. It was a city of traders and admirals, of markets and temples. Its reach extended across the western Mediterranean. For a time, Rome and Carthage existed in weary tolerance, each aware of the other's strength, content to grow in opposite directions. That peace would not last. The island of Sicily lay between them, a land of rich fields and strategic harbors, when a small mercenary group in Sicily requested Roman protection. The Senate debated. Intervention would mean war with Carthage, a naval power with centuries of maritime experience that Rome lacked. The decision to intervene drew Rome into its first true war beyond Italy. The First Punic War had begun. It was a conflict neither side had fully prepared for. Carthage dominated the sea. Rome had little naval experience, but the Romans learned quickly. They captured a Carthaginian ship and used it as a template to build their own fleet. They trained crews with relentless discipline. They developed the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned sea battles into hand-to-hand combat, something Roman soldiers excelled at. For more than 2 decades, the war dragged on. Rome won battles, then lost entire fleets to storms. Carthage countered with its superior seamanship, but struggled to hold territory inland. Cities changed hands, alliances shifted. Sicily became a graveyard for thousands. In the end, it was Roman resilience that prevailed. In 241 BCE, after a final naval victory at the Battle of the Aegaeus Islands, Carthage sued for peace. Rome imposed harsh terms. Sicily became Rome's first overseas province. The Republic had stepped beyond Italy and claimed foreign soil as its own. But peace was shallow. When Carthage turned to Spain to rebuild its power through conquest and silver mines, Rome watched with suspicion. The final blow came from a Carthaginian general whose name would echo through history. Hannibal Barca, son of a commander from the First War, took an oath in childhood to never make peace with Rome. In 218 BCE, he acted on that vow. Leading a multinational army from Spain, Hannibal crossed the Pyrenees, forded rivers, and did what no Roman thought possible. He led his forces across the Alps. He descended into Italy with elephants, cavalry, and an iron will, bringing war directly to the heart of the Republic. Hannibal's army won battle after battle, at the Trebia River, at Lake Trasimene, and most devastatingly, at the plains of Cannae, where perhaps 50,000 Romans perished in a single day, encircled in one of history's most perfect tactical victories. Cities in southern Italy defected. Panic gripped Rome. It seemed the Republic might fall, but Rome did not surrender. Under the cautious leadership of Fabius Maximus, Rome avoided open battle. They harassed Hannibal's supply lines, refused to give him the decisive victory he needed. Hannibal remained in Italy for more than a decade, undefeated but isolated, a threat Rome could not crush, but refused to bow before. Meanwhile, Rome fought elsewhere. In Spain, a young general named Publius Cornelius Scipio proved himself brilliant. He captured New Carthage, drove Carthaginian forces from the Iberian Peninsula, and brought the war to North Africa itself. In 202 BCE, at the Battle of Zama, Scipio and Hannibal met for the first and only time. It was a reversal of Cannae. This time, Roman strategy prevailed. Hannibal's elephants were turned against him. His infantry, worn and outnumbered, could not withstand the Roman legions. Carthage was defeated. Hannibal survived, but the war was lost. Rome imposed even harsher terms. Carthage was stripped of its fleet, its independence in foreign policy, forced to pay crushing tribute. Scipio earned the title Africanus, and Rome stood supreme in the western Mediterranean. With Carthage humbled, Rome turned its gaze eastward. The Hellenistic kingdoms, successors of Alexander the Great, had grown complacent. Rome claimed to protect its Greek allies, but protection soon became interference, and interference led to war. The Macedonian Wars brought Rome deeper into Greek politics. When Macedon resisted Roman pressure, war was declared. At Pydna, Roman legions shattered the once invincible Macedonian phalanx. Greece, the teacher of Rome in art and philosophy, became a province. In 146 BCE, Rome crushed Corinth, the heart of Greek commerce. Statues were looted, temples burned. The treasures of Hellenic civilization were packed onto Roman ships and carried west. That same year, Rome also destroyed Carthage forever. For decades, Cato the Elder had ended every speech, regardless of topic, with the same grim refrain: Carthage must be destroyed. When Carthage defended itself against an African neighbor, Rome seized the opportunity. The Third Punic War was less a battle than an execution. Carthage resisted fiercely for 3 years. When Roman forces finally broke through, they fought house by house. The city was leveled. Its people were killed or enslaved. In a single year, 146 BCE, two ancient powers, Carthage in the west and Greece in the east, had been brought to ruin. Rome stood alone, master of the Mediterranean. What followed was not a formal declaration of empire, but an imperial reality. Provinces were established, governors appointed. Wealth poured into Rome, gold, slaves, grain, art. Senators returned from campaigns with unimaginable fortunes. Villas multiplied across the Italian countryside. The city expanded, the Forum filled with monuments to victory. Yet even as Rome mastered the Mediterranean, cracks had begun to form beneath its foundation. The armies were changing. The poor crowded into the city. The rich grew richer, and the Republic, designed for a city-state, struggled to govern an empire. Victory had brought wealth beyond measure, but it had also brought imbalance. Roman citizens who had fought abroad for years returned home to find their farms ruined or sold to pay debts. The great estates of aristocrats, worked by slaves captured in Conquest, expanded across Italy. Free farmers, the backbone of the Republic, poured into Rome with no land and no future. Into this crisis stepped Tiberius Gracchus. In 133 BCE, as tribune of the plebs, he proposed bold land reform. Public land illegally seized by the wealthy would be redistributed to the poor. The Senate, threatened by loss of property and power, resisted furiously. Tiberius bypassed them, bringing his reforms directly to the people. When he sought re-election, a move seen as dangerously close to monarchy, his enemies acted. He was attacked and killed during a riot on the Capitoline Hill. His body was thrown into the Tiber without ceremony. The message was clear. Rome could tolerate hunger and injustice, but it would not tolerate challenges to tradition. 10 years later, Gaius Gracchus took up his brother's cause. He was more charismatic, more organized, more ambitious. He proposed land distribution, subsidized grain, citizenship for Italian allies, judicial reforms. His speeches drew massive crowds, but again, resistance grew. When violence erupted, the Senate passed an emergency decree authorizing any force necessary. Gaius fled. Surrounded on a wooded slope, he asked a slave to take his life. His head was taken as a trophy. Reform had ended in blood once again. Violence was now a tool of Roman politics. New figures emerged. Gaius Marius, a man from humble origins, reformed the army. He opened its ranks to the landless poor, who became more loyal to him than to the state. His repeated consulships broke tradition. If the people supported you, if the legions followed you, the old rules no longer mattered. Then came Sulla, an aristocrat who saw in Marius a rival. When conflict arose over military command, Sulla did what had never been done. He marched his army on Rome itself. He entered the city as a conqueror, seized power, drove Marius into exile. When Marius returned, the city was soaked in blood. When Sulla regained control, he was even more ruthless. He appointed himself dictator and posted proscription lists, public death warrants. Political enemies were hunted, their property seized, their families destroyed. Sulla claimed to restore the Republic, but his methods had torn it apart. He eventually retired, leaving behind a government technically intact but spiritually broken. The Republic was at war with itself. Amid the chaos, a new figure began to rise. Julius Caesar, descended from ancient nobility, but with little more than a name and ambition. He studied rhetoric, mastered law, served in the military. He climbed each rung of political life with calculated hunger. Caesar formed a political alliance with two powerful men, Pompey the Great and Crassus the Rich. Together they intended to control Rome from behind the curtain. This first triumvirate was not official, but it dominated politics. In 59 BCE, Caesar became consul. When his term ended, he secured command in Gaul. For nearly a decade he fought and conquered, defeating coalition after coalition. He crossed into Britain, the edge of the known world, and returned with stories that deepened his legend. He wrote accounts of his campaigns, sent them to Rome where they were read aloud like epics. The people loved him, his soldiers adored him, his enemies feared him, but Crassus died in battle. Pompey, left in Rome, grew suspicious. The Senate ordered Caesar to return without his army. It was a line drawn in fear. In 49 BCE, Caesar made his decision. He led his army across the Rubicon River, the boundary between his province and Italy. It was treason. It was also a declaration. "The die is cast," he reportedly said. Civil war erupted. Pompey fled to Greece. Caesar pursued. At Pharsalus, Caesar's forces crushed Pompey's despite being outnumbered. Pompey escaped to Egypt, where he was murdered by a local court hoping to please Caesar. Caesar arrived and was presented with Pompey's severed head. He wept, whether from sorrow or strategy, none could say. He lingered in Egypt, entangling himself with Cleopatra, the brilliant queen who became his lover and bore his only known son. Together they traveled the Nile. Together they dreamed. When Caesar returned to Rome, no one could oppose him. He was appointed dictator, first for a year, then for 10, then for life. He reformed the calendar, planned colonies, introduced laws for debt relief. He refused to call himself king, but he accepted honors that blurred the difference. Statues were raised. His image appeared on coins. He sat on a golden chair in the Senate. On the Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BCE, Caesar entered the Senate House. A group of senators, many former allies, gathered around him with concealed blades. They stabbed him more than 20 times. He fell at the foot of a statue of Pompey and died. The conspirators thought they had saved the Republic. Instead, they opened its final wound. Caesar's death did not restore the old order. It shattered what little remained. Rome would bleed again, not over policy, but over who would rule the ruins. The man named in Caesar's will was not a celebrated general. He was a teenager. Gaius Octavius, later known as Octavian, and eventually as Augustus, was in Greece when Caesar died. But when he received the news and the name, he did not hesitate. He crossed the sea, entered Rome with quiet confidence, and began to gather allies. He joined with Mark Antony and Lepidus to form the second triumvirate. Together, they hunted down Caesar's assassins and defeated them at Philippi. The men who tried to save the Republic ended their lives by their own hands. But no alliance in Rome lasted. Octavian and Antony soon turned on each other, their rivalry growing with every province claimed. Antony settled in the east, falling under Cleopatra's influence. Their union, romantic and political, stirred deep suspicion in Rome. Octavian stayed in the west, consolidating power, portraying himself as defender of Roman tradition. In 31 BCE, the two sides clashed at sea near Actium. Octavian's forces prevailed. Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Egypt, where they later died by their own hands. With their deaths, the last obstacle was removed. Octavian stood alone. But he did not declare himself king. He knew Rome too well. In 27 BCE, he stood before the Senate and announced he was restoring the Republic, returning power to them. The Senate, grateful and compliant, crowned him with honors. They gave him the title Augustus, the revered one. They called him Princeps, first citizen. Yet his power was absolute. The Senate acted at his direction. The army swore loyalty to him. The provinces answered to his governors. Augustus reigned for more than 4 decades. Under him, Rome entered an era of peace and prosperity, the Pax Romana. He reformed taxes, strengthened borders, built roads and aqueducts. He filled the city with marble as he had promised. He made Rome not just a political capital, but the glittering heart of an empire. He reshaped the military into a professional force loyal to the state. He established the Praetorian Guard to protect his person. He reigned long enough for an entire generation to know no ruler but him. His succession was never clearly settled. He had no surviving sons. He adopted relatives, planned for heirs, but watched many die before him. In the end, he chose his stepson, Tiberius. When Augustus died, in 14 CE, the Senate declared him a god. Temples were raised in his name. The Republic was gone in all but name, replaced by something new, something more enduring. The people had accepted the trade, chaos for order, violence for stability. Rome had passed from the age of citizens to the age of emperors, and the world, from Judea to Britannia, from the Rhine to the Sahara, now answered to the will of one man. When Augustus died, his stepson Tiberius inherited the purple. He was a seasoned general, but a closed, cold man, more comfortable with military ranks than senatorial applause. He maintained the system Augustus built, but suspicion festered in his heart. Tiberius was followed by Caligula, whose early promise devolved into apparent madness. He declared himself a god, demanded worship, treated the Senate with contempt. After 4 years, he was murdered by his own guard. The Praetorian Guard then found Claudius hiding and proclaimed him emperor. Bookish and afflicted with a stammer, he had been dismissed by his family. But he proved capable. He conquered Britain, reformed bureaucracy, extended citizenship. Claudius was likely poisoned by his wife Agrippina to make way for her son Nero. Young Nero yearned to perform rather than govern. He sang on stage, raced chariots, and fancied himself a poet. When fire consumed much of Rome in 64 CE, Nero's response focused on rebuilding in his own image. He constructed a vast palace on the ruins. He blamed Christians for the fire, launching brutal persecutions. His rule grew erratic. Provinces rebelled. The legions declared for other leaders. Nero fled and took his own life. His death ended the Julio-Claudian dynasty and triggered the year of 4 emperors, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and finally Vespasian, fought for the throne. Vespasian, a practical man from humble origins, restored order. He founded the Flavian dynasty, repaired finances, and began the Colosseum, built on the site of Nero's palace as a gift to the people. His son Titus reigned during Vesuvius's eruption, which destroyed Pompeii and Herculaneum. Titus handled disasters with compassion. His brother Domitian followed, more autocratic, eventually assassinated. The Senate then chose Nerva, beginning the era of the 5 good emperors, a golden age when rulers were chosen by merit rather than blood. Trajan, a Spanish-born general, extended the empire to its greatest size, conquering Dacia and reaching the Persian Gulf. His reign brought glory and prosperity. Hadrian, his successor, secured borders rather than expanding them. He built Hadrian's Wall in Britain, traveled constantly, promoted Greek culture, and governed with long-term vision. Antoninus Pius followed, with perhaps the most peaceful reign in Roman history. No major wars, no rebellions, just steady governance. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, ruled during crises, invasions, plagues, constant warfare. Yet he never wavered in duty. His meditations reveal a man burdened by power, but devoted to service. This era saw Rome at its height. Aqueducts carried water over mountains. Roads connected distant provinces. Cities flourished with baths, theaters, forums. Roman law grew sophisticated and humane. Literature and art thrived. The empire stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. Perhaps 70 million people living under Pax Romana. Christianity, born during Tiberius's reign, spread quietly through cities and villages. Though occasionally persecuted, it grew steadily, laying foundations that would transform the empire. When Marcus Aurelius died in 180 CE, he broke the pattern of adoptive succession by giving the empire to his son Commodus. It was a fateful decision. Commodus was unprepared to rule. He styled himself a gladiator, fought in staged combats, saw governance as theater where he alone deserved applause. He was eventually strangled in his bath by conspirators. His death opened chaos. The empire was literally auctioned to the highest bidder by the Praetorian Guard. From the chaos emerged Septimius Severus, commander of the Pannonian legions. Born in North Africa, he was the first emperor from that continent. He militarized administration and advised his sons, enrich the soldiers and scorn everyone else. His son Caracalla murdered his brother and ruled through terror. Yet Caracalla issued the Constitutio Antoniniana, granting citizenship to all free men in the empire, formalizing Rome's evolution from city-state to universal empire. Between 235 and 284 CE, more than 20 emperors rose and fell. Most were military generals, most died violently. The empire unraveled. Armies fought each other instead of defending frontiers. Germanic tribes pushed across the Rhine and Danube. The Sassanid Persian Empire invaded from the east. Cities were sacked, legions routed. For the first time in centuries, Rome's borders were systematically breached. Emperor Valerian was captured alive by the Persian king Shapur I, allegedly used as a footstool before being skinned and stuffed as a trophy. Entire regions broke away. In Gaul, a splinter empire declared independence. In the east, Queen Zenobia of Palmyra carved out her own dominion. Emperor Aurelian, a soldier from the frontier, fought to restore what had been lost. He reconquered breakaway regions, defeated Zenobia, and built walls around Rome itself, sensing even the capital was no longer immune. He was given the title Restorer of the World, but like so many, he was murdered by his own men. The crisis finally ended with Diocletian's accession in 284 CE. He understood that the empire had grown too vast for one man to rule, so he divided it. He created the Tetrarchy, 4 rulers, 2 senior Augusti and 2 junior Caesars. Each governed a quarter of the empire from regional capitals. Rome itself lost its central role. Diocletian reorganized provinces, separated civil and military authority, increased the army's size. He implemented comprehensive census and tax reform, binding people to hereditary occupations. He also launched the Great Persecution, the most severe attempt to suppress Christianity. Churches destroyed, scriptures burned, believers executed. Despite its intensity, the persecution failed to halt Christianity's spread. In 305 CE, Diocletian did something extraordinary. He voluntarily retired to his palace in Split, where he spent his remaining years cultivating cabbages. His succession system collapsed almost immediately. From the chaos rose Constantine. According to Christian tradition, before the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 CE, Constantine saw a vision, a cross of light, with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He ordered his soldiers to place Christian symbols on their shields. He won the battle and entered Rome as a man with new conviction. The Edict of Milan in 313 CE granted legal tolerance to Christianity, ending official persecution. It was not yet the state religion, but it was the beginning of transformation. Constantine moved the capital east, away from Rome to the site of Byzantium. He rebuilt it as Constantinople, a new Christian capital free from pagan associations, strategically positioned, controlling the strait between Europe and Asia. Constantine ruled until 337 CE, baptizing into Christianity before his death, the first emperor to die a follower of the faith his predecessors had tried to erase. Under his rule, Christianity spread into law, administration, and hearts. The empire was becoming something new. After Constantine's death, the empire gradually split. In 395 CE, following Emperor Theodosius I's death, it was formally divided between his sons. The Western Empire ruled from Ravenna, the Eastern from Constantinople. Theodosius had made Christianity the official state religion. The Edict of Thessalonica established Nicene Christianity as the sole legitimate faith. Pagan temples were closed, traditional sacrifices prohibited. The millennium-old religious traditions of Rome were officially abandoned. The empire faced new pressures. Germanic tribes, pushed westward by the Huns, sought refuge within Roman territory. In 376 CE, Visigoths asked to cross the Danube. They were admitted, but exploited and abused. Within 2 years, they rebelled. At Adrianople in 378 CE, they destroyed a Roman army and killed Emperor Valens. It was one of the most devastating defeats in Roman history. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, remained within the empire, sometimes allies, sometimes threats. Alaric wanted land and recognition. When denied, he marched on Rome itself. In 410 CE, Alaric's forces entered Rome and sacked the city for 3 days. It had been 800 years since Rome had fallen to foreign hands. The psychological impact was immense. If Rome could fall, what else could stand? In the 5th century, the Huns under Attila invaded from the east, threatening both halves of the empire. In 452 CE, Attila marched on Rome, but was convinced to withdraw by Pope Leo I. Whether through diplomacy, disease, or superstition remains mysterious. The Vandals moved through Gaul and Spain into North Africa, seizing Carthage and cutting off Rome's grain supply. In 455 CE, they sacked Rome again, this time leaving deeper devastation. By the mid-5th century, the Western Empire was no longer sovereign. Germanic kingdoms controlled former provinces, Visigoths in Spain, Franks in Gaul, Vandals in Africa. The Western emperors were often puppets. In 476 CE, the emperor was a boy named Romulus Augustulus, a name heavy with irony, echoing both Rome's founder and its first emperor. Odoacer, a Germanic commander in Roman service, deposed Romulus and sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople, declaring a separate Western emperor unnecessary. This moment marks the traditional fall of Rome, though for people living through it, there was no dramatic collapse. Many structures of Roman life continued under new management, but in the East, the empire continued. Constantinople, surrounded by massive walls, ruled by capable emperors, remained wealthy and powerful. Emperor Justinian I, ruling in the 6th century, dreamed of restoring imperial unity. He sent his general Belisarius to recover North Africa from the Vandals, accomplished with remarkable speed. The Italian campaign proved harder, a 20-year struggle that devastated the peninsula. Though victorious, the cost was enormous, especially as bubonic plague killed perhaps 40% of Constantinople's population. Despite challenges, Justinian's reign saw remarkable achievements. The magnificent Hagia Sophia with its revolutionary dome remains an architectural marvel. Even more enduring was the Corpus Juris Civilis, a comprehensive compilation of Roman law that would form the basis of European legal systems for centuries. The 7th century brought new challenges. United by Islam, Arab armies swept through Roman provinces. Syria, Palestine, Egypt fell within a decade. The exhausted empire lost vast territories. Twice, Arab forces besieged Constantinople itself. Twice, the formidable defenses held. The failure of these sieges preserved the empire as a Christian bulwark and saved much of Europe. The empire adapted, becoming more Greek, more Christian, more compact. The theme system reorganized provinces into military districts. Greek fire gave naval superiority. Religious differences with Rome widened, culminating in the schism of 1054 that divided Christianity into Catholic and Orthodox branches. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade, Western Christians who should have protected Constantinople instead sacked it. For 3 days, they looted, burned, and destroyed. It was a wound beyond healing, though Byzantine forces recaptured the city in 1261. The empire was a shadow of its former self, confined to the city and scattered territories. While Byzantium withered, the Ottoman Turks rose in Anatolia, conquering city after city until only Constantinople remained. In spring 1453, Sultan Mehmed II began the final assault. For 53 days, defenders resisted. Citizens prayed in churches. The city waited for a miracle. On May 29th, the walls were breached. The last emperor, Constantine XI, died sword in hand at the final barricade. His body was never found. The great cathedral became a mosque. Constantinople became Istanbul. The empire that had endured for over 1,000 years after the West fell breathed its last. The Roman Empire, which had lasted for over 2,000 years, from Romulus to Constantine XI, had finally ended. Yet, even in death, Rome did not vanish. It lived on in ways both visible and invisible, shaping the world that came after. It lived in the laws passed down to kingdoms across Europe, Roman legal concepts, the presumption of innocence, the importance of intent, the distinction between civil and criminal law became foundations of Western justice. It lived in language. Latin evolved into Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, Romanian, spoken today by nearly 1 billion people. Even English derives 60% of its vocabulary from Latin. It lived in the roads that still carry travelers, following routes planned by Roman engineers 2,000 years ago. It lived in architecture. The Pantheon's perfect dome inspired buildings from the Renaissance to the present. Roman innovations, the arch, vault, concrete, made possible structures of unprecedented scale and permanence. It lived in Christianity, which used Roman roads and cities to spread, then adopted Roman administrative structures. Dioceses often matched Roman provinces. The Pope took the title Pontifex Maximus. It lived in political aspirations, Charlemagne's coronation as Roman emperor in 800, the Byzantine identity as Romaioi, the Russian czars claiming to be heirs of the Third Rome, the Habsburg Holy Roman Empire. It lived in the American Republic, whose founders studied Roman history, adopted Roman symbols, and built a capital echoing Roman architecture. It lived in the calendar, July for Julius Caesar, August for Augustus, months bearing Roman names we use without thought. It lived in the very concept of citizenship, a formal legal status conferring rights and responsibilities, Rome's gift to political thought. It lived in education, where Latin remained the language of learning for centuries, where Roman authors are still read, where Roman history is still studied. It lived in philosophy. The Stoicism of Marcus Aurelius influenced thinkers across centuries. Roman ideas about virtue, duty, and civic responsibility echo through Western thought. Most fundamentally, Rome bequeathed a cosmopolitan vision, the idea that diverse peoples could participate in a shared community while maintaining their identities. Though imperfectly realized, this ideal remains powerful in our interconnected world. The same human hopes, fears, and dreams that motivated Romans, security, prosperity, meaning, beauty, motivate us still. In that shared humanity lies perhaps Rome's most profound legacy. The story that began with shepherds beside the Tiber River, that rose through republic and empire, that endured triumph and catastrophe, has not truly ended. It continues in us in the world Rome helped shape, in every law we follow, every word we speak, every building that reaches toward the sky. Rome never fell, it transformed. Rest in the knowledge that you are part of that continuing story, a thread in the great tapestry of human civilization that Rome helped weave. Good night.